back. Everybody can be seated. Did the jury follow the admonition during the lunch break?
Yes.
Did you have a good lunch?
Yes.
The weather's certainly nice out there today. We're going to continue with the Commonwealth's case in chief. Commonwealth's next witness.
Commonwealth calls Mackenzie Savage.
Mackenzie Savage, please. Mackenzie, if you'll come up to the witness stand up here, please. How are you today? Now, before you have a seat, I'm going to talk to you about the importance of telling the truth. Will you raise your right hand for me? Do you promise that you're going to tell the truth? All right, have a seat. Be comfortable. That's a big seat. Scooch it up close to the microphone. The microphone, tap on that microphone so you can see how it sounds. There you go. So everybody can hear what you've got to say. It's important that you stay scooched up close to the mic so we can all hear you. You're not nervous, are you? I would be. Heck yeah. All right, let me ask you a couple of questions. Now, do you understand that when you're in a courtroom like this, and I'll bet you've never been in a courtroom, have you? Other than just a few minutes ago, you came in and kind of looked around. Do you understand that it's really important that you tell the total truth when you get asked questions?
Yes.
Even if it's going to be painful or embarrassing or might hurt somebody's feelings?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Mackenzie, can you tell the jury your name?
Mackenzie Savage.
Can you spell your name?
Makenzie.
Your last name.
Savage.
Are you Trey's sister?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury about the last night when you saw Trey? Did you all go up for baths?
Mm-hmm.
Did you take a bath that night?
Yes.
Did you take a bath or a shower?
Shower.
What did you see him after that?
Yes, he got in the shower and then after he was done, he got out and went upstairs and got dressed, and then he went downstairs like he was in a hurry, and then went out the door and then almost slammed it shut.
And where were you? Where did you sleep that night?
On the couch.
Where's the couch?
It was by the front door.
Down on the first floor?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did he ever spend any time with you after the shower that night?
No.
Do you remember how much time went by between the shower and when you left?
No.
That's all the questions I have, but the defense attorney might have any more questions.
Judge, may I pull a chair up so I'm not tearing over?
Yes, you may. 'Cause you're pretty darn tall.
Kinsey,
Hi.
do you like to be called Kinsey?
Yes.
Are you in school?
Not yet. I'm on summer break.
What grade are you going to be in?
5th.
Do you like school? Can you read real good?
Mm-hmm.
You play any sports? When did you think you were going to have to come to court today?
I don't really know.
Are you staying with your grandma now?
No.
With your daddy?
Hmm.
Does your daddy have a TV? Has he been watching the news?
Not in front of me.
Has he been watching anything about this trial?
I don't really know.
Has he talked to you about the trial?
No.
Do you know what the trial is even about?
Trey and everything.
What about everything? Do you know anything else about it, just about Trey?
I know that it was about, Josh, both of the Joshes and everything.
You don't know when you were going to have to come down here?
I knew it was going to be either today or yesterday.
Did your dad tell you? Did a prosecutor talk to you? Do you know what a prosecutor is?
I didn't know, but I forgot.
You said that you remember stuff that happened when Trey died.
Mm-hmm.
How long ago was that?
2 years ago.
Is that a long time? Do you remember what happened that night really, really good?
Not perfectly.
Did you usually sleep on the couch?
Yes.
Is that uncomfortable for you?
No.
Did you ever sleep with any stuffed animals or anything?
Not on the couch. I didn't.
Sometimes you slept upstairs in your bedroom?
Yeah, usually I did.
And you liked Josh Young? Did you like him? You don't know? Has anybody been talking to you about Josh Young?
No, not really.
Do you remember what month it happened?
May.
Do you remember what date we're talking about?
The 10th or the 11th.
You just remember that on your own?
Mm-hmm.
It's not what somebody else told you?
Mm-mm.
Do you remember if it was warm or cold, raining?
No.
We do know that it was dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember talking to a lady that was a social worker named Bridget Fraley? Do you remember going down to the Crimes Against Children unit? You do remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember talking to a lady at that time?
Yeah.
Were they putting you on video?
No.
Were you being interviewed? You know what an interview is? It's kind of like what we're doing right now. I'm asking questions and you would be given answers.
Oh.
Does that make sense? Did the police in Trey's case ever come talk to you?
No.
Around the time it happened, did anybody, social worker or anybody like that, you know what a social worker is, right? It's a man or a woman that helps people in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever talk to anybody like that? But do you remember on June the 30th going to the Crimes Against Children unit?
No.
And you would have been with your grandmother Frida? Can you remember that now?
Yeah.
And do you remember Frida sitting there with you when you were answering questions? And did you tell the truth then?
Yes.
You don't lie, do you? Never. It's not good, is it?
Mm-mm.
How well can you read?
Pretty good.
If I gave you something to read, could you read it to yourself and tell me if you understand what you're reading? Yeah, Coach. This last sentence right there, that line and that line.
Yes.
Did you understand that sentence?
Yes.
Did you make that statement to Miss Bridget? Did you tell her that?
I think so, yeah.
And was that statement true when you made it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you read that little sentence to the jury, please?
Up, come up.
understand? And did you tell Miss Bridget what you said on that paper?
I think.
What did you tell her?
I don't really remember what I told her. It was a while ago.
But you read what that says, right, on the paper? And are you saying you don't remember telling her that, or you do?
I don't remember what I told her that much.
Thank you.
Redirect.
Just a second.
Mackenzie, was it your stepmom who told you when you were going to come down here? Because we had met your parents, correct? But we'd never talked to you before today. Was the time that you saw Trey that night after the bath, was that the last time you saw him?
Yes.
Was he with anyone then?
No.
Thank you.
Recross. Any questions from the jury? All right. Kinsey, we'll let the jury ask questions too, so be patient with me, okay? You doing all right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I can have the attorneys up here. I'm going to put this noise on that makes a big noise, but we'll be right back to you. I'm going to read to you what their question is if you'll give us a good loud answer.
Okay.
Was Josh Young at your house that night?
I don't know.
Did you hear Big Josh or Little Josh after Trey left come back to your house that night?
No.
What time did you go to sleep on the couch that night?
I don't know.
Did Josh Galker ever come out to play video games while you were on the couch that night?
No, he never did.
Thank you very much. You did a great job. I'm going to let you head out the door with whoever brought you. Thank you. Commonwealth's next witness,
Commonwealth calls Jean Goodman.
Jean Goodman. Ms. Goodman, if you'll come up to the witness stand, please. I'm going to place you under oath before you have a seat, if you'll raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be truthful? Thank you. Have a seat and be comfortable. I encourage you to sit up close to the microphone. It's adjustable for your height. Keep your voice up good and loud so we can all hear your testimony.
Okay.
Ma'am, could you tell the jury your name and spell it for the record?
Jeannie Goodman, Jeannegoodman.
And do you live in the M Drive area?
I live down a block away in a different, actually, neighborhood.
Did you know Trey?
Actually, I did not.
Did you know the families involved?
Only through my son,
Who is your son?
Wade.
And what was his association with the family?
He would go over and play basketball and eat, grill out. He'd call and say, I'm going to be late because they're having dinner and that thing.
And what is his age in relation to Trey and Josh Young's age?
At that point, he was 13.
Did you go to the funeral?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you notice anything about Josh Young at the funeral?
He was unemotional. Everybody else was in tears. Even I. I mean, it's a sad situation.
Did you ever have any conversation with them about Trey?
After the funeral, I can't remember how many days exactly, he came over to see my son, and we were on the back porch, and I said, I'm very sorry for your loss, and he shrugged his shoulders and said he wasn't my blood. And at that point, that kind of bothered me, and I looked at my son, and he said he means he wasn't his kin. That just kind of bothered me.
Did you ever have any other conversation with Josh Young that related to Liberty High School?
Yes, ma'am. I said I was real surprised that something like that could happen in that area because the field at the school has lights that randomly come on. And he said they're not random, they alternate. And I've lived there over 25 years and I've never known them, stood over and watched them. I just assumed that they flip here, there, on and off different times. And I've not gone over there neither. So.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay.
Cross-examination.
Ma'am, when you said you went to the funeral, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You said that you went to visitation, or did I?
It was at the funeral.
It was at the funeral?
Yes, ma'am.
At that point, did you personally have an awareness as to a belief about who did this to Trey?
No, ma'am. I just knew it was an awful thing that happened.
Okay. And where exactly were you seated during the service?
Well, there's a left side and a right side. I sat on the right side toward the back with my son.
Okay. And where was Joshua Young seated at the service?
He was in front of us.
In front of you, but in the back of the...
He was
Back of
like
the
on the
room?
right side, like the same side we were, but several rows up.
But several rows up.
Uh-huh.
And who was he seated with?
I'm not sure. I don't know the family. I only pretty much met him.
Okay. You now know who Joshua Gowker is, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you see Joshua Gowker next to Joshua Young?
I really wasn't looking. I was more crying.
Okay. As for the statement about liberty, let's be clear. When we talk about lights, where is your house as it pertains to that school?
My house is here. There's one house beside me, and then that's the field
So there's a house between your
between
house
me and the field.
the big field.
Right.
If you had to say what side, north, south, east, west of the property your house would come up to, be on the
The
east
side of my house would be the west side.
Okay. So you're looking, if you step outside your home and look over that way, you're looking across a big field to the
I would be
location of...
like looking to my right, and that's the field.
Okay. Well, and again, let's just be clear, there's fields, there's more than one over there, right, by the school. Is that...
No, it's just a huge field, and then toward the front of the school is parking lot.
What about behind the school?
That's where the field is, ma'am.
Okay, so there's a huge field that comes around the school?
It's fenced. There's a fence around that.
What is the furthest you can see behind the school as you look? When you talk about this field, what's beyond that?
I can see like part of the driveway that goes behind the school. I believe that might be like where their dumpsters or something are.
Okay.
I can't, and I see a brush line.
A brush line?
Yeah, like trees, and
And how long have you lived in the home that we're talking about?
over 25 years.
Okay. So you're familiar, there's a ditch over there.
Yeah,
where
but I
we're
don't-
discussing.
I don't know anybody on the other side, so I don't go there.
Okay. The lights, period, any lights over there, don't illuminate anywhere near that ditch, do they? They don't light
Well,
up that.
yeah, well, I know they go over to where the bushes are.
Okay.
I mean, they just kind of blink on and off all, you know.
Okay.
So at one point, the whole place is not lit as, you know what I'm saying? It's like one will go off and another one will come on.
Okay.
So it illuminates pretty good, but,
Okay. It is random, correct?
well, that's where I thought it was.
And I'm assuming this comment that you attribute to Joshua Young must have concerned you, right?
Well, just kind of weird I'm using the word alternate, the alternate.
So you must have paid close attention to how...
No, I have not. I've not gone over there to see if they do alternate or not. It's just a weird word to say since I've always thought they just randomly kicked on and off at different times.
And you can step right outside and look over and see what the lights are doing any given night, right?
If I walked right to my next door neighbor's driveway, I could sit there and watch them, but I don't go there.
What led to your comment about lights at all?
I was surprised that anything could happen over there since it's well lit.
That's all I have, Judge.
Redirect.
I just wanted to clear up with
Which one is? I'm going to show you what has already been entered as Commonwealth's Exhibit 1, and this is an aerial photograph of Liberty. Is your house on that photo?
I'm trying to figure out where the roads are.
This has already been identified as
This is Vin.
yes. Here, let me use this. This is a bigger
'Cause
one,
I would
and I'm going
be,
to also show you
I would be
Exhibit
right
3.
here.
This is Amanda's house that has already been circled, and that's
Okay,
Liberty.
and
This
that's me. I'm
Okay,
here. I have
okay.
one neighbor here, and
I
then
will, let me give you a pen so you can circle it. I'll give you a pink marker if you can circle your house there on Exhibit 1. And I'll show the jury. This. Thank you.
uh-huh.
Judge, it's not up yet.
Yeah.
All right, is this the circle that you just made?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is this the building, the house that you say is in between your house and the field?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And are those trees there that are blocking?
Yeah, those are big old hickory trees.
And is this the soccer field with the lights?
Yeah, that's the big field. Yeah.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Recross?
No, Judge.
Any questions from the jury? May we release this witness? Defense?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Goodman. You're free to go.
Okay, thank you.
Commonwealth's next witness,
The Commonwealth calls Dr. Amy Burrows Beckham.
Dr. Amy Burrows Beckham. Dr. Burrows Beckham, good afternoon. If you'll allow me to place you under oath, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be truthful?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Have a seat and be comfortable. I encourage you to sit up close to the microphone. It's adjustable for your height. Keep your voice up good and loud so we can all hear your testimony.
Once you're situated, Doctor, will you please introduce yourself to the jury?
I'm Dr. Amy Burrows Beckham.
Where are you employed?
I'm employed by the Commonwealth of Kentucky as an assistant medical examiner
How long have you been employed in that capacity?
since July 1, 1995.
What is your educational background?
I received my Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Kentucky. I then entered the University of Louisville School of Medicine, where I obtained my MD degree. After medical school, I pursued a 5-year residency in the field of pathology. During my 5th year of pathology training, I spent 1 year in concentrated study in forensic pathology. After completion of residency, I was hired by the Commonwealth.
Do you have a membership in any professional organizations?
Yes, ma'am. I belong to the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the National Association of Medical Examiners, the Kentucky Medical Association, and the Greater Louisville Medical Society.
Do you have a specialty?
Forensic pathology.
And are you certified in pathology?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain what your work experience has been?
Well, since being employed by the Commonwealth, I've been performing the duties of a forensic pathologist since July 1, 1995.
And what are the job duties as a forensic pathologist, as an assistant medical examiner?
I perform autopsies on cases that are brought to our office either by coroners or by individuals who want a private autopsy done on their loved one. During the autopsy, I try to determine the cause and the manner of death. Sometimes I have to come to the courthouse and testify on my findings. I also am a gratis assistant professor at the University of Louisville School of Medicine, where I also help teach residents and medical students.
How many, if you had to estimate, how many autopsies do you think that you have performed?
I average about 260, 280 autopsies a year, and I've been doing this since 1995, so several thousand.
And can you explain to the jury how a case gets to you? How is it, you mentioned the coroner or the police or a private family member, but police specifically, how does a case get to you?
Well, police don't bring cases to us. The coroner will bring a case to us. Kentucky has a coroner medical examiner system. The coroner is an elected official. Each county in Kentucky has their own elected coroner. They can appoint deputy coroners. They're like death investigators. When somebody dies, the coroner will go to the scene or the hospital or the house, and they'll gather information about that person, try to figure out if an autopsy is necessary, and if an autopsy is necessary, then they'll send it to the medical examiner, who are trained physicians in forensic pathology, to perform the autopsies. There are some cases, forensic means refers to law, so there will be some cases that are of interest to police officers, and in those cases, sometimes the police may attend the autopsies.
And can you explain what an autopsy is?
An autopsy is a post-mortem examination where we examine someone who is deceased. It generally, when we perform an autopsy, first we will describe the exterior body, describing clothing, characteristics of the body such as height, weight, hair color, eye color, scars, marks, tattoos. We also document any medical treatment that's been rendered to the body, such as IV lines or tubes going in nose and mouth. We will describe the injuries that we see on the outside of the body, the exterior of the body. These can be anything from bruises, abrasions, to gunshot wounds, to stab wounds. In most cases, we will perform an internal examination where we will open the body, we'll remove the organs, examine the organs, and try to, we do this to help us further determine a disease or injury. We will obtain body fluids that we send off for toxicology. Sometimes we might take pieces of tissue that we can look at under the microscope to further elucidate the disease or injury. And once we have all of our studies together, then we will finalize a report determining the cause and manner of death.
And you mentioned a report. Do you document your findings in any other way? And what happens to that report that you mentioned?
Yes, we document our findings in a report. I will dictate the findings at the autopsy table and then finalize it. We'll also take photographs of the body, and I make a wound diagram showing specific injuries on the body.
And is anyone else present when you are conducting an autopsy?
Yes, we have autopsy assistants or autopsy technicians who help us during the course of the autopsy. And then in certain cases, police might be present, or crime scene unit people, or the coroners might be present.
Okay. And in the course of your duties as an assistant medical examiner, did you do an autopsy on Trey Zwicker?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you do that?
May 12th, 2011.
And where did you perform that?
In our office, the Office of Chief Medical Examiner, which is on Bell Avenue here in Louisville.
How did you get started on the exam?
Well, the coroner brought the body to our facility, so I signed up to do the autopsy, and I went through the regular steps during the external examination. The crime scene unit people were present for the autopsy, so they were collecting evidence while I was going through the course of the autopsy, and then documented it as I described how we perform an autopsy.
And what were your observations as far as the external examination?
Trey had multiple injuries to his body, mostly to his head, face, and back.
Were there signs, you said injuries, can you explain what those were?
Yes, ma'am. The most significant injury that I found was a large gaping wound in the back of his head. The scalp in the back, what we call the occipital region, had a large gaping wound. Underlying this wound was a skull fracture, which was pretty extensive. Looking at the characteristics of this wound, I felt that this was what we call a chop injury. A chop injury is a type of sharp force injury in which you have a heavy object that has a sharp end on it, so something like an axe or a machete. And the reason I thought this might be a chop injury is because the wound where the scalp split, there are no tissue bridges. When somebody is struck with a blunt object, the skin or the scalp will split, and there will be little tissue bridges going from one wound edge to the other. Those are intact blood vessels and nerves. Tissue bridges tell us it's a blunt force injury. This had no tissue bridges on it. It had an underlying fracture, so I felt that this was due to a heavy, sharp object.
And you said you initially, that was your initial decision. Has your opinion changed over the course of this?
Well,
you need going back and reevaluating. Can you explain that?
If I provided more history, like there were repetitive blows in the same area, I could say, well, this could be consistent with a blunt force injury, because as that blunt object continues to hit the area in that, the scalp in that area, the tissue bridges will break. So it could be a blunt force injury that I thought was a sharp force injury.
Okay. You talked about the specific injury, and that was the one on the back of the head?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that correct? What other injuries did you observe externally?
On his upper back, mostly on the left side, and involving the back of the neck, was a large area of red contusion or red bruise, And within the bruise on the back, I saw some pattern injuries. Sometimes when an object strikes the body, it will leave a pattern on the body that helps us try to determine what sort of object was used. On the left upper back was pattern injuries, what we call like train tracks. It's multiple parallel bruises separated by what we call central pallor. And when we see an injury like this, it makes us think that it was caused by a rod-type object such as a pipe or a broom handle or a round stick because of the type of pattern that it was. So there's a large bruise on his back, and then that bruise went up into the back of his neck.
Ma'am, I'm going to approach, and you mentioned that you all take photos and document as you are performing the autopsy. And I've got what I've marked as Commonwealth's 116 through 121. I'm going to ask you to take a look at these, please. Those photos fairly and accurately reflect how Trey Zwicker's body and injuries were when you conducted the autopsy.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I would move to admit Commonwealth's, lost track, I think,
116 through 121.
116 through 121, please.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Produced into evidence.
Thank you. Permission to publish.
Yes.
Doctor, I'm going to use a document camera back here. I have a pointer, I think the bottom button. I'm going to ask you some more specific questions about the injuries that you've mentioned. I've got Commonwealth's 117. I'd like to start, there are two photos on this page, but let's talk about this one on the top, please. Can you explain to the jury, can you show them, I guess, what you were talking about with the injuries you saw?
Yes, ma'am. This is showing Trey's back of head and his back, and you can appreciate this big gaping wound on the back of his scalp and what we call the occipital region, the diffuse bruising on the back of the neck, and the large bruising with a pattern injury on the upper back. And as I was describing the train track type of pattern injury, you can see multiple parallel pink contusions separated by an area of pallor. So I counted at least 4 injuries. I believe there's more than 4 blows that cause this injury, but at least 4 distinct patterns that I could see.
And you talked about the wound on the back of Trey's head. You said your initial, I guess, observation suggested a chopping or sharp force injury. Can you show on the picture, and perhaps a close-up one would help, the bottom of this, of 117. Can you explain the 2 ways that injury could be caused based on your observations?
This is the back of Trey's head, and we've shaved the hair on the back so we could see the wound better. And as you can appreciate, it's a large gaping wound. There are no tissue bridges that I could see, no little bits of tissue going back and forth. There was this little skin tag to indicate possibly at least 2 blows with the object. Underlying this injury is a skull fracture. So these characteristics are why I thought it was a sharp force injury, that if there are repetitive blows in this area, then it could break my tissue bridges and look like a blunt force injury.
Okay. On what injuries, if any, did you observe to the front of Trey? These were on the back. What did you observe on the front?
Trey also had some injuries to his face. He had what you would call a black eye. He had swelling, or what we call edema, around the eye, and also on the left side of his face. He had bruising about the eye, some individual bruising that I could see. He also had some scleral hemorrhages. That's hemorrhages on the white of the eyeball. So the conglomeration of these findings made me think that he was punched in the eye. He also had a fracture of his nasal bone here, and the bony fragment cut through the skin so we could see the bony fragment. He also had a little skin split here. I wasn't sure if it was a sharp force injury or blunt force injury because I wasn't seeing tissue bridges, but it could be either from a blunt object or a sharp object. And he also had a similar type of injury on the left nasal ala, the left side of his nose. Examining his mouth, he had some, on the inside of his lips, the mucosal surface of the lips, he had multiple superficial abrasions, bruises and lacerations. He also had what looked like little chips of the teeth of his upper jaw. So it looked like the teeth caused these injuries to his mouth, likely as he's being beaten on the back of the head with his face down.
If you could, this is, I'm sorry, Your Honor, for the record, this is Commonwealth's 118. Can you just show the injuries that, point out the injuries that you've been discussing?
So this is the front of Trey's face. You can appreciate the swelling and the red discoloration around the left eye. He has additional small bruises here, here. I don't have the eyelid open so you could see the scleral hemorrhage, but he did have hemorrhage on the right of his eyeball. This is one of those little skin splits, either a laceration or an unsized wound. This is where the nasal bone was fractured and the bony fragment protruded through this laceration. And then this is the laceration or incised wound of the left nasal ala. In addition, he also had what I call a little bit of periorbital ecchymosis on the right. It's some purple discoloration, some confluent purple discoloration, and this is the result of a basilar skull fracture. In addition to the large fracture on the back of his skull, he had fractures on the base of the skull. That's what the brain sits on. And sometimes when you have basilar skull fractures, the blood from the head likes to seep through and go to the soft lax tissues of the face. So a lot of times you might get a black eye if you have a basilar skull fracture. So I believe this is due to the basilar skull fracture, but this is due to a blow to the eye.
I've got 116 and see if this might allow you to explain a little better why it is that you think there's a difference between this one that you think could be caused by the repeated blows to the back of the head, you know, and the skull fracture, the blood coming forward, as opposed to this one that, in your medical opinion, is from getting punched in the eye.
If you can appreciate all of the swelling of the upper and the lower eyelid, he also had a lot of swelling on the left side of his face. This red and purple discoloration, the individual bruising that you can see with what we call the ecchymosis, also can be referred to as a raccoon eye. It's going to be a confluent discoloration. So this looks certainly more swelling, more individual bruises, and then the scleral hemorrhage.
And what about getting hit in the front of the face with a baseball bat as opposed to a punch? Would you expect a difference in injury there?
If he's struck like this with a baseball bat, I would not expect all of these injuries because our eye is somewhat protected in the bony features of our face, so I would just expect to see bruising on the bony prominences. Maybe if the end of the bat were shoved into his eye, I still don't think I would see the individual small bruises.
Okay. What about with a metal pipe? If someone were hit in the face with a metal pipe, would you expect to see that injury or something different?
I'd expect it to be the same as a bat.
Did you make any other observations about external injuries to Trey?
He had just a little scratch abrasion on the right side of his neck, and on the right index finger he had two little, one is a little bit of avulsion, and 1/8 inch avulsion, and a little abraded contusion. I believe that is all of the injuries that I've observed.
Okay. What did you do after you made your observations of the external wounds that you could see? What did you do next?
Then we performed our internal examination where we make a Y incision. We reflect the tissues back so we can see all of the organs. We take the organs out, we weigh them, examine them, take little pieces that I can turn into a glass slide. Took body fluids for toxicology.
And as part of that, were you able to make any further or more detailed determinations about the injuries that Trey received?
When I examined the head, we could see the skull fracture better. I did what's called a posterior neck dissection. When he was on his belly, we made an incision going down his back to reflect the tissues back to see the fracture to the back of his skull and also all the hemorrhages and the soft tissues and muscles on the back. When we examine the head, we reflect the scalp, bring it forward so we can examine the skull and remove the skull to examine the brain. He had multiple hemorrhages over the brain, what we call subdural and subarachnoid hemorrhages. He also had bruises on multiple surfaces of the brain. He had some lacerations of the brain on the area of some of these basilar skull fractures, and some swelling of the brain, and then some what we call decompositional changes of the brain.
I've got Commonwealths 120 and 121. Would ask you to explain, see if we could illustrate these injuries. This is 121. Can you show the fracture, the skeletal fracture there?
Yes, ma'am. This is Trey is still on his belly. We've made a cut down the back. These are the cervical vertebrae. This is the back of the skull, what we call the occipital bone. So the skull sits on the spine here, and here we have an extensive kind of triangular-shaped fracture that was underlying that large gaping wound to the scalp. You can appreciate some hemorrhages in the soft tissues, and in addition, during my examination, I've felt that there was some separation between the skull and cervical vertebrae number 1, something we call atlanto-occipital region, and between cervical vertebrae 1 and 2, I felt that these, it was stretched here. There wasn't a distinct injury, there wasn't an injury to the spinal cord, but I think due to the repetitive blows on the back of the head, it kind of stretched these structures.
And Commonwealth's 120. I don't think the jury has actually seen this photo before. Let me need to rotate it for you.
That's fine.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you pull it down a little bit more?
Yes, I'm sorry.
This is kind of a dark picture. It's not the best, but this is the base of the skull. This is what the brain will sit on. So we've removed the skull cap, we've removed the brain. This would be the front area of the brain. This is around where the ears are, and this is the back. This is the occipital region. You can appreciate this is a very large fracture encircling the occipital bone. This is what we call the foramen magnum. It's the little hole in the base of the skull that the brainstem goes through and then becomes the spinal cord. So this fracture is encircling the foramen magnum. There's also additional fractures, what I call the petrous portion of the temporal bones, the lesser one of the sphenoid bone. And this is what's called the cribriform plate. This was fractured also, and this is why I believe he had some periorbital ankylosing on the right.
Thank you. As part of your internal examination, after you do the Y incision, do you get stomach contents?
We examine them.
And can you tell the jury what findings, if any, you had from examining Trey's stomach contents?
Trey had about a liter of food, several cups of food still in his stomach, and some of it was identifiable by me. I thought he had some potatoes and peas and possibly meat in his stomach, but a large amount of food, identifiable food in the stomach.
And are you able to make any sort of determination as to when that food was eaten in relation to when Trey was killed?
With that amount of food and that it was visually recognizable, usually that indicates that someone ingested a meal about 1 to 2 hours prior to death. I can't say that. It might not have been maybe 3 hours, but I think shortly after he ate.
And were you able, I believe you said you could identify some of the food. Was it all identifiable, or was some of it digested?
Some of it was chewed up and starting to be digested.
Okay. So 1 to 2, and possibly up to 3 hours after his last meal.
Yes, ma'am.
You would estimate that he was killed.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you mentioned taking blood and urine and sending those to the lab. There are what tests are done on that blood and urine?
Generally, on most of our cases, we run what's called a drug abuse panel. This will test for alcohols and the common drugs of abuse, such as cocaine, opiates, methadone, marijuana. So they will test for those substances in the blood and the urine.
And were any drugs found in Trey's blood or urine?
No drugs were found in his blood. He had a breakdown product, what we call a metabolite of marijuana or cannabinoids in the urine.
Now, can you explain to the jury the difference in having something in your blood versus in your urine? I guess maybe the order of how it's processed by the body.
If a drug is in the blood, then I would say that this person is under the influence of that drug. If it's not in the blood but in the urine, I can only say that this person used this drug. I can't say how much they used. I can't say exactly when they used it. But since it's no longer in the blood, I do not believe that they were under the influence of that drug.
And is someone, since we're talking about marijuana, which is THC is the drug that's measured, if someone were to have smoked marijuana shortly before their death, would you expect to find THC in their blood?
Yes, ma'am.
And if it is, I guess, would it be fair to say that the drug works through the blood first and then the urine?
Yes, ma'am. It courses through the blood, and then the body will break it down either through the liver.
How long would THC stay in someone's blood?
We can find it in someone's blood up to 3 days after use.
And then, generally speaking, in someone's urine?
It can be in the urine several days to several weeks after use.
Okay. Now, did you have any other findings as far as injury from the internal investigation that you did, the internal examination, excuse me?
Or the external?
Internal.
Internal?
Mm-hmm.
I have an additional finding combining both external and internal injuries.
Thank you.
I believe Trey may have suffered also a bit from positional asphyxia. He was found face down beside a creek bed. When I received his body, his face was flattened. I could tell that he was face down for quite some time. I believe once he was face down on the ground receiving these blows, he did not move. His body remained where it was after receiving the blows to the back. He had what we call subendocardial hemorrhages. The endocardium is the lining of the chambers of our heart. And sometimes when people are in shock, whether it's from a head injury or from blood loss, sometimes we will see these little hemorrhages underneath the lining of the chambers of the heart. And to me that indicates he did not die right away from the head injury. I think he was alive for a little bit, and with his face being down into the ground and he's not able to move, I believe he's unconscious at this point. With his face being smashed into the ground, he's having a hard time breathing, so I think the head injuries in combination with a lack of oxygen due to an inability to breathe well led to his death.
Okay. And when you are making your determinations, do you use scene photos as well as the observations and findings that you make during the autopsy.
Yes, ma'am.
And in this case, did you have some scene photos available to you to use in your determinations?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to show you a couple of photos that have already been admitted into evidence. This is Commonwealth 34. Sheriff, do you mind? Thank you. Did you see photos that demonstrated the positioning of Trey's body at the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And Commonwealth 57. Did you receive or were you able to see photos that demonstrated the dirt that was on Trey's clothing?
Yes, ma'am.
During the scene? When you did you receive any photos of the scene around Trey's body, as far as any of the rocks or trees that had what appeared to be blood on them?
I could see the ground around Trey's body. I didn't really get any pictures of the trees showing any blood spatter in the trees.
Okay. What about on any of the ground around it? Was it just this area right around with the pooling?
Yeah, I saw it from a different angle.
Okay. And are you able to make any medical determinations based on, say, the blood on Trey's arm or any of the blood in this area?
All of the blood spatter that I saw on his right forearm and around his body are consistent with what we call a medium impact blood spatter. Medium refers to injuries caused by a blunt object or maybe a sharp object, as opposed to high velocity blood spatter, which would be caused by gunfire. So there was a lot of blood spatter around him and on his forearm, which is consistent with the beating that he received.
Okay. And the jury has heard testimony. Do you know Dr. Nichols?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The jury heard from him earlier, I guess, last week. I don't know what week we're in anymore. Are you able to say with any sort of medical certainty what instrument or what type of instrument caused the damage on Trey's back, where you talked about the railroad tracks? Can you explain to the jury what your conclusion is about that?
I believe all of those injuries were caused by a cylindrical object, such as a metal pipe or a rod.
And then the injuries the injury to the back of Trey's head, where we had the open wound, are you able to say with any medical certainty what caused that?
No, ma'am. Several objects could cause that.
Okay. Can you eliminate a metal pipe?
No, ma'am.
Can you eliminate a baseball bat?
No, ma'am.
Can you eliminate the narrow end of a baseball bat?
No, ma'am.
Have you come to a conclusion based on your observations during the autopsy and the scene photos with any medical certainty as to maybe the order of operations or how Trey was killed?
I have a possible scenario in mind as to what happened to Trey that evening. I believe he sustained the punch to the face before he fell down, face down on the ground. And looking at the pattern of dirt on the back of the left side of his shirt and his pants, I believe it's possible if he's struck in the eye, he goes back and lands somewhat on his left side, and then either he rolls over or somebody pushes him over to expose the surfaces that were beaten with the objects to cause the injury to the back of the head and the back.
And are you able to say, within any degree of medical certainty, how many times Trey was hit once he was down?
No, ma'am, more than 4.
And are you able to say whether one person or more than one person committed all of the damage to the back?
No, ma'am, I cannot.
Are you able to say if the same person punched, if the person who punched is the same as who hit from behind?
No, ma'am.
Doctor, what was your finding as to the cause of death?
Trey died as a result of multiple injuries sustained in an assault. The main injury was the closed head injury to the back of it, to his head.
And the manner of death?
Homicide.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Cross-examination.
I may borrow the podium, Your Honor.
You may. Is the jury doing okay break-wise?
Dr. Burrows, you were kind enough to meet with me for this trial.
Yes, sir? Mm-hmm.
You sat down in your office,
Yes, sir.
and we had some photographs.
Yes, sir.
We looked at them together,
Yes, sir.
and I asked you a bunch of questions.
Yes, sir.
You were trying to be helpful to me.
I was trying, yes, sir.
With my lay understanding of forensic pathology. Do you remember when we were talking about, on the left-hand side, the injury to the face?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember talking about, at first, the scenario where you could have been punched in the face?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember after you had, you told me that Trey had fallen to the ground, that it was possible that those injuries could have been caused by shale or some other rocky substance in the ground as his head was being beaten and his back was being beaten? Do you remember telling me that?
I think some of the injuries are likely due to that, but I do believe that this is a true result of a punch to the eye.
You did tell me that as we looked at those pictures together, and you said, now that I look at it, these injuries could have been caused by beating his head into the ground.
Yes, the lacerations or incise wounds.
You know Dr. Nichols?
Yes, sir.
He's a highly respected forensic pathologist.
Yes, sir.
Have you taken courses from him?
He trained me.
Do you have any reason to disagree with him about anything?
I may.
Is forensic pathology a study where reasonable minds can differ?
Yes, sir.
Are you in a better position than Dr. Nichols to draw conclusions from what you observed because you were actually at the autopsy with your own eyes and saw the injuries as opposed to him looking at photographs?
I believe I had the advantage, yes, sir.
So don't you try to record everything that you saw in the autopsy for review purposes?
Yes, sir.
You didn't neglect to take a picture of something that you saw for any reason that was important.
We didn't have a picture of the scleral hemorrhage, but I can't recall any other pictures that we don't have.
Were you directing the taking of pictures?
Not always. The techs are trained in taking pictures of the injuries, and then sometimes I might say, I want a picture of this.
Did they work with you during the autopsy?
Yes, sir.
When Trey's body was brought to your office for the autopsy, was he brought there in a bag?
In a body bag, yes, sir.
And then his body was laid out on a table for the evaluation?
Yes, sir. We roll him onto our autopsy table.
And was it your understanding that some evidence had already been removed from his body before you saw his body?
I just know the evidence that we obtained at the autopsy, but I don't know what was removed at the scene.
Do you use a dictaphone when you do your autopsy?
Yes, sir.
And then you recopy your notes from that?
I correct my dictation, yes, sir.
looked down, did you notice whether he had anything in his pockets?
We did not find anything in the pockets.
You did note that there was a yellow paint chip on his left jean pocket on the outside.
It looked like a paint chip, yes, sir.
Did you preserve that?
CSU collected that.
Now, I want to ask you about some of Dr. Nichols' conclusions, and please tell me which ones you agree with and which ones you disagree with. Dr. Nichols found no evidence of grasping or holding by another.
Correct. I would agree.
He also found that protracted cardiac output, as confirmed by blood spatter at the scene and on the body of Trey Zwicker, and ground surface, and within the body of the decedent. I know that's a long sentence, but we don't follow all that.
Not really.
Okay, he found that there was protracted cardiac output, that it was confirmed by the blood spatter at the scene, and it was on the body of Trey, on the ground surface, and within his body. Do you agree with all that?
I would say yes, there was cardiac output due to finding the subendocardial hemorrhages, but all of the blood spatter, the heart could have stopped, but we could still continue to get some blood spatter if the blows were occurring right after the heart stopped. I'm not sure if he's saying the blood is spurting out of his wounds to cause the spatter, or if it's the result of the body being struck by an object and getting the spatter.
But there was protracted cardiac, I guess this is more medical terms, protracted cardiac output. That means a lot of blood was being pumped out of him by his heart, essentially. Is that...
Well, I believe his heart was still pumping and he was losing blood from the injuries to the scalp.
Okay, and then Dr. Nichols' opinion was that the injuries inflicted while prone on the ground surface. You
Yes.
agree with that?
The injuries to the back of the head and the back, yes, sir.
He just said the injuries, so you would disagree.
The only thing I don't agree with is the black eye, but the other injuries, the little abrasions and the mouth injuries, and certainly the injuries to the back, all occurred when he's lying prone, being beaten.
I guess there's a difference between speculation and reasonable medical certainty. Is there a difference in your mind?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so are you telling the jury, in your opinion, within a reasonable medical certainty, you believe that he was punched in the face or struck in the face with an object?
Yes, I believe he was punched in the eye, left
With,
eye.
Object, with a fist, with...
I think a fist.
What from your observation would lead you to believe that it was a fist? What evidence is there? Why wouldn't it be a rock or some other object as opposed to a fist?
Well, if it were a rock, I might expect some abrasions, cuts from the sharp surface. If it were the end of a rod, I also might expect some abrasions or maybe the eye even being disrupted. If it's an object striking this way or this way, I would think he would be somewhat protected here. He wouldn't have the scleral hemorrhages. He wouldn't have the multiple contusions around the eye.
So you don't think he could have been hit with a bat that missed his eye? The end of a bat?
Can you show me how you think he was hit?
I'm just asking you, like this, the bat like this,
Like this?
like this.
The bat stopping here?
Yes, ma'am. Is that a possibility?
It still doesn't give all of the bruising and swelling. I guess it is a remote possibility.
If he was struck here with a bat, wouldn't the bruising move up into his eye area?
Well, he wouldn't get the scleral hemorrhage if the bat is just hitting the cheekbone. So I would expect more bruising and swelling of the cheekbone as opposed to upward and the upper eyelid.
Okay, and then he has another conclusion, and please tell me if you agree or disagree with this, of unencumbered access to all body surfaces free from physical obstructions at the scene. I think what he is trying to say there is that he didn't receive an injury from a stationary object or anything cause other than that which caused the trauma.
Say that again. What did he
Let me
say?
tell you what Dr. Nichols said. Unencumbered access to all body surfaces free from physical obstructions at the scene.
So the assailant could attack the body from any angle? Yes, sir.
Is that fair? Okay. And then injuries, okay, here we go again, just get a clarification. Injuries to the face occurring while prone, likely following blow to the back of the head. And you, as I understand your testimony, some of them may have and some were not.
I believe all but the black eye.
All but the black eye were caused by the, could be caused by the force that was brought to bear on his back and head.
Yes, sir.
And then injuries to the back produced by multiple blows with same or similar instrument, all in one exact plane. So in other words, the parallel tracks that you saw were caused by the same or similar instrument.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And then in his opinion, the rod-like structure with a smaller barrel diameter than a regular sized baseball bat. And he says because the back injuries are measured with a half-inch spread, and that's what you had actually measured, and he believed that a baseball bat when swung with force would present at least a 3-inch diameter to the body as a target. So the question I have to you is it your opinion that the parallel tracks that were caused by the beating were caused by an object with a smaller diameter than a baseball bat?
Yes, sir.
Also, when we had our discussion, you remember I was making notes when you were.
Yes, sir.
We talked about food.
Yes, sir.
Remember I asked you a question about whether you could actually visually see the type of food
Yes, sir.
when you did your evaluation. You told me that you could actually see undigested peas.
Yes, sir.
Is that right? And then I had to
Can I have the
ask-
attorneys up here, please?
window?
Approximately. It's an estimate.
But it probably, I guess the theory behind all this is, it's not just a theory, it's a proven fact that once a person dies, then the digestive process stops.
Yes, sir.
And you know about the timetable during which food digests and how long food will stay in the stomach.
It's all an estimate, and it depends on different factors.
One factor would be how much food Trey had to eat.
Yes, sir.
If he ate a lot, an extreme amount of food, then it might have been longer in time.
It could have been.
And if he didn't eat very much food at all, it would have been shorter in time.
Yes, sir.
So I heard you say originally 1 or 2 hours. I was just trying to find out the window, the maximum window that we're talking about, since we're dealing with variables that we don't have answers for. So what would be a definite time that we could not go beyond as far as time of death? If that makes sense.
I don't think it would go beyond 4 hours.
With respect to you, correct me if I'm wrong on this, you did change your opinion with respect to the initial assumption of sharp force trauma,
I'm open to other possibilities.
but you didn't change your opinion, or you just can't say within reason?
I can't say exactly what object was used. It could be consistent with a heavy, sharp object or repetitive blows from a blunt object.
And you said, correct me if I'm wrong, in your direct testimony, did you say that you didn't have all the information about the number of blows?
I cannot tell you how many.
Okay. What information did you learn, and from what source, that caused you to reconsider the issue? And at what time did you reconsider that issue? In other words, when did you, originally it was sharp force trauma, and then some other time you said it could have been blunt force trauma. Did you change your mind the same day, or was it later? And what caused you to change your certainty in that?
I believe through the course of the investigation, they brought up the possibility of a baseball bat, and I was thinking if it struck multiple times in the same area, it could split my tissue bridges, so I cannot rule out a blunt object, a blunt, non-sharp object.
So when you said they, do you mean Detective Russ?
The police, yes, sir.
Detective Russ called you a month later?
Let's see. He called me on the 29th of June. I completed my report on the 14th of June. Said possibly a baseball bat used.
And you were asked to factor in that information into your conclusions?
Yes, sir.
And you did do that?
Yes, sir.
And the bridges that you talked about could be smashed with repeated strikes, just like a cut would destroy the bridges. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
When you did your initial report, did you have any information that a sharp object was used to commit a crime? In other words, if somebody said we found a knife or an object, or...
The only thing, right before we started the autopsy, I was speaking with Detective Scott Russ, and he said they found a rusted lawnmower blade in a creek. But that's the only possible sharp instrument, and I'm not even sure how sharp that would be.
But you never looked at it?
Correct.
Okay. Trey was 14 years old.
Yes, sir.
He weighed 187 pounds.
Yes, sir.
Now we're talking about rule-outs and what evidence is. Within a reasonable scientific certainty, you cannot say how many people were involved in this crime.
Correct.
You cannot say how many objects were used.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
direct?
No, thank you.
Questions from the jury? Okay, doctor, if you'd be patient with us. Jury have your answers. No apparent order, just the way they're stacked up. Could second weapon, bat, have been used to create extensive bruising to head and base of neck?
Yes.
Do we know where the yellow paint chip went?
I gave it to the crime scene unit, and they were the ones to take it to the lab.
You mentioned injuries on his right hand. Would those be synonymous with being stepped on?
Not necessarily. They were just two little bitty abrasions. It's non-specific. I can't say what caused those.
Can you determine the order of the injuries on Trey's body, front or back?
I believe he was punched in the left eye and fell back, and then received all the other injuries.
Would Trey lose consciousness with the facial blows?
I can't say definitely he wouldn't. If you think of football players sustaining a blow to the head, he might have been knocked out. I'm not certain. I just can't say for certain.
Did Trey try to defend himself?
I don't have any evidence of defensive injuries. I believe once he's on his belly, he's not moving. There's nothing on the hands or forearms to indicate he was trying to block any blows.
How long could there have been cardiac function after the injuries?
I think at least several minutes. I'm not sure if I can go as far as an hour. I've seen people survive a head injury similar to this, only, they'd be unconscious, they'd go to the hospital and maybe succumb to their injuries hours or days later. I can't say exactly how long he had cardiac activity. I don't believe he was conscious during this, during his death. Several minutes, possibly.
Do you think the object that beat Trey was wood or metal?
I cannot tell.
If it was wood, do you think there would have been wood pieces?
If it's an old, damaged wooden object, possibly, but I didn't find any such wooden fragments in the injuries.
May we release this witness?
Sure.
Thank you, Doctor. You're free to go. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our mid-afternoon break. Please remember your admonition and be ready to come back in at 10 minutes until 3. That's about 15 minutes. All rise for the departing jury. Remember your admonition. Jury's out of the courtroom. 15-minute recess. You all discuss scheduling?
Yes.